Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns, the podcast where three film fans pitch their own sequel, prequel, remake, and general franchise continuation ideas to well-known films, and in this case, TV shows. With me, Calvin.
I'm Alan.
I'm Sol.
Today we're discussing Absolutely Fabulous, the BBC sitcom which aired sporadically from 1992 to 2012 and is now about to release its first silver screen entry. The show is well known here in the UK, but for those of you who might not have heard of it, episodes generally revolve around Eddie Monsoon, played by Jennifer Saunders, who owns a moderately successful PR company in London and spends her days drinking, smoking, and generally being quite petulant with her best friend, former model, Patsy Stone, played by Joanna Lumley. The pair are usually joined by Eddie's cynical and demure daughter, Saffron, played by Julia Sawala, dotty mother, June Whitfield, and unbelievably stupid personal assistant, Bubble, played by Jane Horrocks. Episodes largely revolve around the subjects of aging, fashion, fads, and the latest must-haves, as Eddie and Patsy get into all sorts of bizarre situations and personal struggles throughout the series, with Saffron often the only sane voice of reason in this world. The show was also written by Jennifer Saunders, who is very famous and well known here in England, along with her frequent writing partner and co-star Dawn French, who co-created the show. 39 episodes of Absolutely Fabulous were produced over 5 series and various specials. 39 episodes might not sound like a lot to any of you American listeners, but I can assure you, 39 episodes of a British sitcom is the equivalent of 200 for a US show. The series is much loved, and finally, after years of waiting, a movie is scheduled for release. At the time of recording, we had no idea what the plot of the movie was going to be, but since then, trailers and the like have been released, and the actual plot of the movie doesn't sound like something too far from what we'd actually pitch on this show.
This episode contains spoilers for French and Saunders, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Beavis and Butthead Do America, every British sitcom movie ever made, and, of course, Absolutely Fabulous.
With that in mind, happy listening.
Talk a little bit about Absolutely Fabulous, the show. I've watched it. It's one of those ones that I'd seen sort of a long time ago, and in preparation for this, I got the whole box set and I've watched them all. What do you think of it?
Oh, I love it. It's one of my sort of favourite British sitcoms. I will say that I much prefer the first 3 series to...
The first in kind of, and then there was a big hiatus.
Yeah, well, it seems to be that they do this now where it's, I think, seasons, series 1, 2, 3 all happened, consecutively, and then series 4 was, 10 years later, but it was weird. They broadcast it in 2 parts. So, on the DVD, it's season 4 episode, part 1 and part 2. Nice. And then season 5 was something else, and then they did those.
Was 5 the 3 one-off special? No, that was later, wasn't it?
That was very recent.
I haven't seen those.
That was the 20th anniversary special.
Yeah.
It was 2012.
Yeah. There's a Christmas one, a New Year one, and then an Olympic one.
Right.
I agree. I think the first 3 were a little bit stronger, because not necessarily because the level of humour was getting worse, but just because it was okay, I've seen this now. It's all the same. It's the same. It's the same. It was always very watchable and funny, but it didn't really feel like it went anywhere.
Yeah.
So perhaps it needed a little bit more growth to kind of sustain it. But like I said, it's all very watchable. And in terms of a sitcom, and I was watching the whole lot back to back, kind of in quite a short space of time. But if you think of it as what is now perhaps an old-fashioned sense of TV, you watch that and go, I haven't seen Absolutely Fabulous for 6 years. And so you watch a new series and it's that was really good. I think because now we watch things in box sets and that sort of thing, it's a different tone. You can't just do the same thing. So perhaps...
I had a similar experience to you. My partner's a big fan, and she has all of the first 5 series and various specials on DVD. So whatever point it was a few years ago, I just started from the beginning and worked my way through and did it all in very quick succession. So it really has all kind of merged into one entity in my mind. I struggle to differentiate anything that happened.
The only really development was Saffron.
Yeah.
She became... Because in the original episode, she's supposed to be 16.
Yeah.
And then sort of she develops and grows as goes to university. And then in the later episodes, she has a kid of her own, all that sort of thing. That character develops and she stands up to the mother a lot more. But that is really the only sort of real character arc in the whole thing. Everyone else just stays the same.
Totally. It'd be difficult to sort of change Jennifer Saunders or Joanna Lumley, because the whole show is about them being narcissistic, horrible pissheads.
Yeah, it works. It works.
Until the movie.
Well,
that's going out with a bang. They can actually make some changes if they want to.
Well, yeah.
I'm sure there will be a Christmas special in 2030. I doubt this is the end.
It's a minor merit that they're all still alive. I mean, June Whitfield is not...
Yeah, I know. June Whitfield doesn't look any older in the 20th anniversary one. She just looks 85 all the time.
She's got the Angela Lansbury syndrome.
What I really like about Absolutely Fabulous, and what I like about French and Saunders, their stuff in particular, is they really embrace the surreal. And it's really unusual, even in a sitcom format. It has a kind of cartoonish quality almost. But they managed to make that work in a mainstream environment. And if you ever watched French and Saunders stuff from the 80s and early 90s, it was like unlike anything else that was going on at the time, like as a sketch show, but it was really meta and like they sort of come out of character and all that sort of thing. I guess it's perhaps, going on from Monty Python and all that sort of stuff. There's obviously the precursors to it. Yeah. But there wasn't much going on about that time. Like the young ones, they're obviously part of that group, and that is a similar kind of idea.
Yeah.
But I think French and Saunders achieved mainstream success with that kind of tone that nobody else has. Because French and Saunders was like your mum would watch French and Saunders. It wasn't just like young students are like, oh yeah, we like anarchic comedy. It was like they hit a mainstream, and Absolutely Fabulous is kind of is a direct route from that.
Well, yeah, it was born out of the French and Saunders show. It was born out of that sketch where Jennifer Saunders basically played that same character, and Dawn French was her daughter. And the whole concept was, what if the daughter's more of a grown-up than the mother? Which is an interesting jumping off point. I think the series just go away from that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because, as soon as you give her a job, she's actually good at what she does, really.
From what I remember, it did feel very much like Safi kind of had a clear purpose that soon became redundant, and then it was this sort of increasingly contrived reasons to keep her around, if you know what I mean. It kind of felt a bit unnatural in later series when she was there. Not necessarily in a way that broke the reality of the show. It just...
I always find Safi again rewatching it, like how sort of real Julia Sawalha plays it. It's kind of it does get quite horrible at times, because like Patsy and Eddie are just like having a go at her and just really laying into her.
Sorry, I don't want to disturb you, but your classic sitcom trope is you either have an insane character in a normal world or a normal character in an insane world.
Yeah.
And that obviously falls into that.
Yeah.
You have to have Safi there to kind of normality, and I can relate to this character. Yeah. And everything else around her is insane.
But when
they do take it to quite extreme places with how much of a hard time she gets from them.
Just it. But it's the fact that she's hurt by it, because I think John Cleese said about Fawlty Towers when, he can, he said Basil can call Sybil whatever he wants, so long as she isn't hurt by it. If she's and why it's so difficult, dealing with death, because it's sort of as soon as someone is actually upset. So there's that episode in season 2 where Eddie's dad dies. And it's Safi's granddad, and it's just sort of really because Julia Sawalha is playing it so genuine, my granddad's died, but then June Whitfield's just doing dotty old woman stuff, and Eddie's in this sort of weird, sort of coping with it, but internalizing it, but then not really giving a shit, and then she the episode ends with her falling in the grave and straddling her dad's coffin, and it gets really close to the nerve for me sometimes.
Do you think the real standout in terms of the show was Joanna Lumley?
Oh, totally.
And I was trying to figure out, because obviously I'm not quite old enough to remember, but how much of an established star was Joanna Lumley before that? And I know she was obviously working, but now she is borderline national treasure.
Yeah, I know her as that woman from Absolutely Fabulous, who's gone on and become this sort of Stephen Fry-esque, you say, national treasure. No, I have no idea. I think, she was quite
in the
established.
60s. She was in a Bond film. She wasn't a big part in it, but she was in that. She was in the Avengers.
She was in those Pink Panther sequels as well. She was sort of the person they put all the eggs in the basket, so to speak, of to continue the franchise in a sense.
It's a great character. We understand that Eddie makes bad decisions and that Patsy is sort of just a horrible person. Well, not horrible, but think about it, she's just selfish and narcissistic, and yeah, she's quite horrible sometimes. But we still sort of like those characters. We empathise with Saffron, maybe, but we don't necessarily need her to win. And there's never any moral message in any of this. Like, even the bits where Eddie kind of makes some effort to bond with her daughter always sort of gets the rug pulled out at the end.
Yeah.
But the thing that really made me think of it with Patsy was a bit where Saffron sort of turned around and she'd burned her with a cigarette.
Oh, yes.
And Eddie just goes, never turn your back on her, darling, you know that. It's like, it's not her fault. It's Saffron's fault. And that was what made me think of it. It's just like, she's like a dog. Like, he attacks you. That's well, you don't turn your back on a wild animal. What are you doing?
Can we talk about Bubble? Because I really don't like, but like,
Bubbles Jane Horrocks.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
She's the only one, because I get like on all the posters, DVD covers, it's the five. It's
The
Eddie,
family.
Patsy, Julia Sawala, June Whitfield, and Bubble. And I've always found this peripheral to. It's that kind of very.
She does feel very, like you say, peripheral. She doesn't have much purpose. It feels like she was there in the earlier episodes as kind of, well, we need this extra character, and then they kind of realise that they don't need her, but at the same time, she'd become very popular, and they felt the need to keep her around.
It's like she must be super popular, because it's like rewatching the shows again and some of the later specials when she comes on screen. The audience are cheering, whatever. In season 4, she had the dual role of like she was that
Katie Grin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's just like so bizarre
But
to me.
I mean, yeah, I know what you're saying, and Bubble is that sort of character. It's like you need her occasionally, and so when they obviously made a great effort to like, oh, now she lives in the house for some reason. It's like, and rather than just being an occasional character because she's in the office, they brought her into it. Let's say Jennifer Saunders obviously really liked the character, or presumably really likes Jane Horrocks. I don't think anyone else could do that. It is a really good performance. It is a character that needs to be in one scene in every other episode. And you like come in and you go, oh, a little sort of weird. And I really like some of the bits, but yeah, it's just like you can't build much around that character because it's just a pop in, do a gag, pop out.
I'm in a similar position to you, I think. I really like Jane Horrocks, but that character I'm not so sure about, to be honest. I kind of, when I started watching it, I thought, oh, Jane Horrocks, this is going to be my favourite character. And then she does just feel very much like she's there, but I don't really care about her presence.
I don't know if it is supposed to be like a comment on the fashion industry or the industry that Eddie is in.
I do think she's quite a well-observed. A lot of people know someone that is that sort of character, and I do think that's probably a big part of the success of that individual character. But that's arguably true of the entire cast of the show. So
yeah, but Bubble is such an extreme character in the same way Patsy is. Eddie is not so much. She's an exaggeration, but Patsy and Bubble are extreme to the point of unrealistic, which is okay in a sitcom world. They are just beyond reality, and that's what I was talking about with the surrealism of French and Saunders in general. Bubble is a good example of that. Like, how does that character? It doesn't make any sense at all. Like things she says. It is a great performance, and I don't know how much of that was on the page and how much she just brought into it. It'd be interesting to know that. The characters, it needs to be used more sparingly, maybe.
Yeah.
But she'll be in the film. They'll put her in there somewhere. I've got her in my pitch.
They're all in there, aren't they? Like all the main cast are back for the.
What about?
I have no idea. I haven't watched. I haven't watched any of the trailers or anything because I didn't.
I haven't seen the trailer.
I was really worried that I was gonna like influence my idea by looking at what they've actually done, and it would just make it even harder. And I still haven't got around to watching the trailer after.
But it's like, where do you go with a film of Ab Fab? Because so much like. I mean, they went abroad in episode 3.
Well, that's what I mean.
The first season.
The cliche is you go on holiday to Spain, and
can we talk about this a little bit, because I'm actually writing a dissertation at the moment about the transition of sitcoms to film, British sitcoms to film. So this is very relevant to my interest. So, but most of my research is sort of 70s stuff, like On the Buses, Dance Army.
I recently watched all of those for fun.
Oh my God.
I like to learn for fun.
Yes.
But
this is so...
But no, I recently went through On the Buses trilogy, The Likely Lads, all that sort of stuff myself. So it's very fresh in my mind.
That general transition from TV show to film, there are some cliches that are involved with it.
Absolutely.
And it comes down to, you have to take it out of the situation. You have to make a bigger world, create a bigger story.
My pitch is largely built around those cliches because I couldn't think of anything else to do.
But yeah, so you're going on holidays, you're going to Spain. But that's because in the 70s, and it was like, that was what working class people started going to Spain. And so having these working class sitcom people going to Spain made sense. It was something you could all relate to. It was creating a bigger story. But the other thing is, you don't have a laugh track. You don't have a studio audience.
It really affects the tone of it. Yeah. It's very jarring at times to go from the language of sitcom to the language of feature film.
And it's all shot on film, not on tape. It's shot on location rather than a little studio.
Yeah.
So everything feels a little bit bigger. But then there's just this hollow kind of lack of laughter, which does affect them sometimes.
It's very interesting. I mean, it goes beyond sitcom to film. The whole canned laughter thing, or audience laughter, no one uses canned laughter anymore. It's very interesting. You look at shows like Red Dwarf is a really good example because they've kind of dabbled in both over the course of the run of the series itself. Series 7, they started filming it in a more quote-unquote cinematic style.
Yes.
And I think they then screened the finished cut to an audience to get the laughter because it was just weird without it. Series 8, they went back to a studio setup. Then Series 9, the Back to Earth special, they went back to that cinematic approach and they didn't bother to screen it to get the audience laughter. The result is this very jarring, weird, hollow show. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like Red Dwarf. It feels like cold and unfriendly. And there are actually a good few examples on YouTube where people have gone back and just edited laughs over footage from that special. The difference it makes is unbelievable. It's so much, you kind of forgive the weaker jokes and the good jokes are punctuated properly, and it just works better.
It isn't just that either. It's the pacing of it, because if you're on a stage in front of an audience doing jokes and you get a laugh, you have to ride the laugh. You have to pace it before you do the next line. Whereas if you're shooting on film, it's just like boom, boom, boom.
I mean, another good example now that you mention it is 30 Rock, which was this single camera sitcom, but they did a couple of live episodes as a weird gimmick, and they're really popular episodes. They're thought very highly of. Personally, I think they're weird, gimmicky things that completely stand out within the world of the rest of the show and just don't really work. But it's very interesting because all the performances have to change because there's an audience laughing at it. Alec Baldwin has, this brilliant performance throughout the show, but then in the live episodes, he'll sort of be stood waiting for the laugh to die down, kind of twirling his hand, waiting for the audience to simmer down so he can get his next line out. And it's this weird breaking the fourth wall through necessity that comes out as a result of it. Yeah, it just feels very strange to see those two. But then has there ever been a feature film with canned laughter in it? I'd be intrigued to know.
Yeah, there will have been.
I mean, not including weird David Lynch style experiments into.
I don't know. I can't think of anything, but yes, probably. What about, to change topic slightly? There's been a bit of a renaissance in terms of sitcom films. In-Betweeners.
In-Betweeners started it very much. Yeah.
So this is because, as I say, I'm writing a thing about it at the moment. It sort of died off in the 70s. And it's just started to come back. Now, I think there's a lot in that involved about the British film industry and what they were doing and what was commercially viable, and TV becoming big more than cinema and all that. So what do you think it is? Like, I mean, you're saying The In-Betweeners started it, but why
it was the In-Betweeners movie. Absolutely.
Why did The In-Betweeners movie get made in the first place?
Sitcom movies have been dribbling out every few years since the 70s. There have been, there was a League of Gentlemen's Apocalypse. There was
that Kevin and Perry thing.
Yeah, like they did still make their way out, but they had a hard time getting funding, and a lot of them didn't seem to find fruition. I mean, the absolutely fabulous film, my understanding is it's been talked about for a long, long time, and it's only recently
That's how long.
And the In-Betweeners movie, I think, was just a very popular show with the right audience demographic for them to think, this is another one we'll get behind. Then it was this monumental success financially that they weren't anticipating on the scale that it was. It was huge. Then off the back of that, you could see they were like, okay, have money to make, your Alan Partridge film that's also been talked about for 10 years. Like, we want it sooner rather than later now. here, you Keith Lemon, you can have some money, even though you we'll fund it. You know,
We can
Mrs.
remake
Brown,
Dad's Army.
yeah, Mrs. Brown's Boys, and Harry Hill, and all these other people just kind of handed a load of money to make films, and not a lot of them have been that successful. And I was kind of worried, to be honest, that it was going to fizzle out almost as soon as it started. But then The Inbetweeners 2 came along, and in my opinion was much better than the first one, which wasn't that great.
What happens in the first one?
They go to Spain.
And the second one,
they go abroad somewhere.
The second one, they end up in like
Australia.
Yeah, okay.
The
I have seen them. I just can't.
The second one,
which.
the second one felt like much more of an extended romp, as it were, whereas the first one felt like they were more conscious of trying to make a movie, but it didn't really work because the people writing it don't appear to be able to do emotionally poignant sequences, and a lot of the laughs were kind of big, and there was so many weird strands and plot elements that kind of were started that went nowhere, or odd, weird little, very well observed moments that you thought were going to lead to things that didn't go anywhere, and then other things that were just so obvious and dialed in from a mile away. And anyway, yeah, like you say, we do seem to be in this weird area at the moment where there's a lot more of them coming out. There's a lot more willingness to
Put the money in.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're totally right that it did definitely start with In-Betweeners, but it's just it's like on a project by project basis as to whether or not it's good.
Yeah, more of them are very bad than are good.
Yeah,
the good ones are very much the exception to the rule. But at the same time, I'm kind of all for every sitcom out there getting a movie. Like, go for it.
Why do they
even I've never actually watched it, but Bad Education.
Oh right,
See,
yeah,
that was a clear. Well, The Inbetweeners was successful.
Yeah,
you can have money. That is not a show that was successful or popular enough to probably get a film made a few years ago.
Why do they feel the need to make? I mean, especially in this day and age where media is so sort of fluid now. Anyway, why make a movie? Why not just do a continuation? I mean, God, do more ab-fab specials. It's like there's no.
It's an odd one with ab-fab because, as we said, they kind of did everything imaginable in the show.
Yeah.
Budget never really seemed to be a limitation.
No, they went abroad like every season. And just season 2, they went to Morocco.
It's like the second episode or something that they go to.
No, it's literally the third episode of the first series. They go to France, and that's like they got them all out there.
Yeah,
there's an episode where they pop out to go shopping, and then they get out of the taxi in New York.
Yeah,
and then just walk around New York for a while, and then come back.
Yeah, it's like I don't know what kind of sway Jennifer Saunders had at the BBC at the time, but it seems like quite a dent in the budget. But there's like every series that would happen. To America, and
it does beg the question of why. But I don't know. I personally do think there's something to be said for. This is the film. We're putting, this is separate from that. We're putting all our eggs into this. This is our big blowout at the end of it. We're going to get everyone back together.
Does this, in terms of Absolutely Fabulous, is this like the swan song? Is this like
I don't know. I don't know. I would be surprised if they don't end up making specials afterwards.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think Jennifer Saunders has said, this is the last one, like 12 times.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no. Because I mean, the end of series 3 was supposed to be, that was it. Like, just end thing. Because British sitcoms, they have 2, 3, 4 season series, and then that's it.
It is interesting though, because for example, I mean, it has to be a certain demographic, I suppose, that the shows would go for. Red Dwarf, to go back to it, that was a sitcom that for the longest time they were trying to get a film off the ground.
That lends itself to a film where you can do some
exactly.
good sci-fi.
That's something that actually lends itself to doing a film because they were always very held down by the low budget. It's something where there would be a real distinction between the two. You'd kind of think, oh, this is the film. Just being let out of the box, they can do whatever they want. But I don't think they'd get funding to make a Red Dwarf film now. I don't think the show has...
If it was going to happen, it would have been 1994.
Despite the renaissance in, sitcom to movie adaptations, I don't think Red Dwarf would find the funding.
Well, I'm curious about, sort of, what you were saying about audience, what Ab-Fab's audience really is. I mean, like Alan, you said earlier about the French and Saunders thing, like it appealed to mothers, right?
It's a very mainstream audience, I suppose, is what I would say. It largely appears to be women and gay people that go for Ab-Fab. But
interesting point, though. Yeah, it is a woman-based sitcom. All the characters are women, and that's obviously a deliberate choice and a backlash against the male-predominated sitcoms and TV in general. And I think it works really well for that. and it does have a different vibe because of it. And I think it does appeal to a female audience base because of that. Obviously, like, we watch it and we enjoy it, so it's not like it's not a woman's show, but that's why it stands out from the crowd. I think a little bit.
I just can't imagine the 21-year-old lads who movie studios normally go, I will have a ticket for Absolutely Fabulous, please.
But there's every year there's a couple of films that are like, oh, that film's aimed at mums,
and they are
and
financially
Helen Mirren's in it, and
very viable. More often than not, Mamma Mia is the last big one that comes to mind. But...
Because they might only go to cinema twice a year, but if you go see that film, then it's all right.
Exactly. Sex and the City's made a lot of money, whether they were good or not.
They weren't.
But no.
I've only seen the first one, but it's one of the worst films I've ever seen.
The second one is actually worse.
Wow.
Yeah. So if the series really has sort of done everything sort of, in its, how would you do a movie adaptation? How would you do it?
Well, let me tell you. The answer is that I don't know. And I think that's going to come across very clearly in the pitch. So what I've got is we open on Patsy and Eddie at Fashion Week or something like that, some sort of fashion thing, and they're dancing and they're doing drugs and there's loads of shenanigans. Patsy photobombing Mick Jagger, or people keep mistaking Lindsay Lohan for Eddie's daughter, and Safi's like, oh, that's not me, and she's there for some reason as well. And so is Jane Horrocks Bubbles. And then this is where we just get all the cameos in, because you know there's going to be, like, I don't know, Elton John. No, he was in the show, wasn't he?
He was in the show, yeah.
This is the thing, they've even done all these gratuitous cameos in the show. It's like Lulu, Emma Bunton.
Dawn French will be in it as well. Like, she's been in it, but she'll be in it again, I'm sure. Like, just get all the cameos out of the way at the start. Get rid of them. And we'll get all the recurring characters from the series in here as well. Get them out of the way, because they're not in the bulk of this pitch. I haven't done a very good job of weaving them in throughout. Just cram them in. But in the background, whilst this is going on, you're getting all these little news reports about rising tensions in the world and stuff. Like zombie movies. Good ones will often just be the reports of the dead, and then they'll turn off the TV, and it's like, what is it? Turn off the TV. So you get a lot of that just going on, Russia's angry and
is this some set in 1982? Maybe the Chinese show.
North Korea's and they keep turning off the TV, turning off the radio. Then they stop paying attention to all of the reports and what have you, because Eddie hears some commotion. And she rushes off to see what's going on. Patsy and Russell Brand are naked in the toilet. Russell Brand's dead from a drug overdose, and Patsy's rushed to hospital where she's diagnosed as a drug addict and told that she has to get off the drugs or she'll be dead within a month.
Russell Brand is the perfect level of cameo. That is exactly right.
They book a holiday to a remote hotel in Spain where they can detox. There's probably a hilarious sequence in an airplane where Eddie's trying to buy some duty-free stuff and getting drunk, and Patsy's trying to sleep with a gay flight attendant, and he's like, oh no, I'm not interested, and she's like, yes you are. It's just that sort of thing. Yeah. Now I'm going to go into the theory a bit here. So, as we were discussing before, in the early days of Britcom movies and what have you, it was pretty commonplace to simply remake an episode of the series without really making any changes. Or sometimes they would remake a collection of 3 or 4 episodes. Just you'd end up with these weird episodic films.
Just cram them together.
Yeah, and it was very odd because they'd often be the first 3 or 4 episodes of the series, but it would be the same cast for the most part returning, but maybe 1 or 2 actors would be different. It was a different continuity. It was very weird. And then in some instances, I think the continuity of the films would even retcon the series, and the film would take the place of...
In On the Buses,
yeah,
the canon is completely different for the films. One of the major characters has a kid in the films, but doesn't in the show.
It's very weird. The only thing I can think of to do anything like that since about, I guess, the 80s would be In the Loop from The Thick of It.
Yeah.
They took a similar approach of just you've got Malcolm Tucker, you've got a lot of the same actors playing different characters.
Well, similar characters.
Yeah, very similar, just the names different.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
It's weird. They changed the names for all of them apart from Malcolm Tucker. And then he's somehow in a different continuity. It's very, very strange.
Bizarre.
Anyway, it was before videos existed, so you kind of could do that. People weren't going to go, oh, I just watched that on TV, because it probably hadn't been on TV for years at the point. The big draw was often something as simple as seeing the characters in colour for the first time. Examples of films that did this are Dad's Army, 1971, and Now for Something Completely Different, 1971, Father Dear Father, 1972, Nearest and Dearest, 1972, Rising Damp, 1980, and it goes all the way through to Bean and films like that, which remade a load of sequences throughout the film. The plot was entirely new, but stuff like Mr. Bean getting a turkey stuck on his head was just lifted out of the show.
I mean, I think when you're handling something like Bean, and I know that this was the case with the Monty Python movie, a part of the reason why they came about, it was to introduce it to a worldwide audience, because obviously those, like, Mr. Bean was like on like English TV or whatever, so you take it to America because you want to, Americans who don't know the show, so you do just do the best of.
Yeah.
Can I just go off a complete tangent?
Yeah.
Why do people like Mr. Bean? It's really shit.
I loved Mr. Bean as a kid.
That's
and
it. I think,
and I've come back
it's
to
a
it
kid's
since,
thing.
and it's very much for kids.
Yeah.
And I think as a kid show, it's very good. But yeah, I don't think it really.
It's slapstick.
has
It's
much.
just universal. It's like
Slapstick is bullshit.
I think there's a lot to be said for. I mean, It Stands is pretty much the only example I can think of. Certainly, the only notable example of doing silent era comedy in the sound era.
It is
Chaplin
it is
and
different.
Buster Keaton and those
makes a
guys
refreshing change, I suppose.
were wonderful, and the only attempt I've really seen to emulate that since has been Mr. Bean. I think there have been a few other, like I think Matt Lucas did a show recently that wasn't very received, that was largely without dialogue. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up, this whole remaking thing, is basically to justify that at this point the film is just a remake of the episode France, because it's an homage to classic films based on classic sitcoms.
They are going to the south of France in this in the actual movie. Yeah, so
Well,
you might not be far off.
Okay. Yeah, that episode, France, on a side note, was very similar to the dreadful Are You Being Served movie, which I would take to almost be something of an homage itself. So yeah, it's not just me being lazy and unimaginative.
No.
They get there and the hotel's not finished. No one speaks the lingo.
Don't drink the water.
The place is undergoing refurbishments, food's awful, they've run out of alcohol, everyone's got poor fashion sense, it's the worst. Eddie and Patsy have booked a special detox bunker at the hotel, and that was played for laughs, because they think it's going to be like this brilliant, like, high-tech thing, but it's just a basement with like a pipe that they can handcuff her to. So they tie up Patsy, and then Eddie goes out to try and get some room service, but she can't find any staff. Then it starts raining, and she's like, oh, how could things get any worse? And she turns around, and there's like a mushroom cloud on the horizon. And now we're subverting the remaking an old episode thing. She runs to the basement, locks herself in, and then we just get about 20 minutes of them in a bunker doing like funny stuff, like having to drink their own piss.
Is that like that's a homage to a bottle episode?
Yeah, exactly. Patsy's leg maybe goes gangrenous or something, and they have to chop it off, and Eddie's like got to eat it. And she's like, oh, take something off my thighs, do me a favor, and then they go to do it and realize that she's anorexic and there's nothing there. There's a whole world of comedy to mine from one of them eating a bit of the other one, and then the film just gets really bleak, and they have some meaningful conversation. We get a rare glimpse of character development, because it's being treated like they're gonna die in a bunker. As much as I love a good bottle episode and think they're a good opportunity for strong writing, this is the movie, so we've got to see a load of money just being spunked away. They've already gone on holiday in the show. It needs to go big. So a few months later, they make their way out of the bunker, and the planet's like scorched to hell, and it's in some sort of nuclear winter. Eddie's grown a beard to show passage of time. Patsy's lost a leg. She loses another leg to frostbite or something. Last 20 minutes of them is just insanity, with them running around with like cannibals chasing them, and then they find out that aliens did it, and like they try to dazzle an alien scout ship and steal the ship, and they fly it into the mothership, killing killing themselves in the process, but saving the people of Earth. And they die as heroes. And Safi and Bubble are toiling away in a field somewhere, desperately trying to farm some food. It's like in Threads, if you've ever seen that. The Earth's reverted back to a sort of medieval, primitive state, and they look up at the lingering mothership wreckage that now orbits the planet in a ring of sorts, and a tear rolls down Safi's cheek. We hear her narrate like the closing moments of the film. It could be something like, "You died as heroes, you saved us, but at what cost?" And then cut to black, wheels on fire, rolling down the road, and it'll be like a cover by Adele or something.
Wow. What a roller coaster ride that. You got a bit of everything in there. You pretty much covered every base.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with this, because it's like you do kind of have to, unless you're going to go meta or like send them to outer space or like have like apocalypse. It's I just can't.
I nearly did go meta. That's the more modern cliche equivalent to going on holiday.
Yeah.
It's been done a little bit, but
it was a League of Gentlemen, wasn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. League of Gentlemen, arguably Red Dwarf, though it wasn't a film, it was their comeback special. And there are a few other instances of it being discussed that I don't think have actually gone any further than that. Okay, so Alan, if you want to give us yours, take it away.
Actually, mine might work as a sequel to yours, Sol, because my high concept is Absolutely Fabulous Afterlife, in which the characters die and go to the afterlife. Okay, we set up the characters. We have the sort of the status quo. You know, a little bit of, we all know who they are, but in case you haven't seen it before, blah blah blah. And some kind of horrific accident occurs. It's probably Patsy's fault because she's like passed out and then died. And so this is Safi, Eddie, and Patsy, sort of the principal characters. They're the ones that die.
Right.
Okay, so they go to heaven. It's actually happened a couple of times in the show where Eddie has a sort of near-death experience and meets Marianne Faithfull, who's God, and it's just kind of white mist.
Are they going to meet someone at the pearly gates? Because it strikes me like that's Dawn the French.
No. So I'm like you. I've got to cram those cameos in. Yeah. So it's not St. Peter at the pearly gates. It's Bubble. so Bubble's like in charge of admin for heaven. So obviously it's complete chaos.
That makes sense.
So we'll get that little bit of cameo going in there, and she's in charge of like weighing up everyone's evil and good deeds, and she obviously decides that they all have to go to hell, and Safi has to go to hell because she's an atheist. So even though she hasn't done anything evil, she's just like, you don't believe so. Sorry.
Oh, that's great.
And like Eddie insists she's a Buddhist and she should be just let to go back and resurrected or something else. They managed to confuse Bubble and like sneak in, basically. You know, you sneak into a club through the bathroom window, like that, but with whatever the heaven equivalent of the bathroom windows. So when they're in heaven, we can have as many cameos as you want. I thought a Rick Mail cameo would be quite nice.
How?
Well, the fact that he's dead is perfect. You have like a hologram. You just find some Rick Mail footage.
No, they do that.
And then just like cut it together.
They shoved Laurence Olivier in that Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow film
exactly.
10 years ago.
You just hack it up.
He's the main villain of the film.
So your plan is to use existing footage, edit it in.
It's just an idea.
Well, no, I mean you could do that. You could CGI it. You could have a lookalike. I mean, I'm trying to figure out.
Just anything works.
Okay.
But Rick Mail is really most conspicuously never in Absolutely Fabulous series. Of all the people who aren't in it, he's the obvious one. Like, obvious connection, isn't it? Yeah, the one thing I noticed about Eddie's character in the show, and the show in general, is it's not a very active character. Like, she doesn't sort of like, oh, there's a problem and here I fix it and that's a conclusion to the plot. Things just happen to her and then she sort of stumbles from one thing to the next. I think that's part of the show, so I'm kind of keeping that. And there's not a lot of structure here. It's kind of like just little ideas. That was the sense of the show. It was not very plot driven.
Totally.
Yeah, well, one thing they don't really like Heaven. It's all like hippies and they're meditating and all this sort of like do-goody shit. So they don't really like it. So they decide to go to hell. So, but like I say, they sort of accidentally stumble to hell, or maybe someone realizes they're not supposed to be there and throw them down to hell. Yeah. And they like hell a lot more. Like the music's better. You got the clothes are much more fashionable, and it's all about sort of sex and drugs and all that sort of stuff. So they actually fit in a lot more there. Well, Saffron's not very happy. The mother, so June Whitfield, she can be a demon. You're gonna have a look. She, like I say, she died years ago, but then she's like making a good living in her. But like she could use her as a demon, as in like she just sits there and talks to people, and they're going crazy. I thought you could have Satan in there. Got Andy Hamilton to play Satan. You know?
Oh my god, I love Andy Hamilton.
Because that is
perfect.
he's another one who seems like an
Yeah.
obvious connection to that group. He's like, he should be part of them. And Bowen Marshall, who are Christopher Ryan and Mo Gaffney,
Oh, right, yes.
they're like Bubble. They're one of those things they just kept bringing them back,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't justified in any way.
Yeah, it was
and the characters
very
would
odd.
come in, do a little bit, and then go off, and it was not relevant to the
Yeah.
plot in any way. So you got to throw them in there. And like, so they'll be in hell. They're like leading a group of like teaching people how to be better demons or something like that. Because that's what their thing always was. They're always like leading a group. Or
Well, he was always
doing-
like writing a screenplay or something. That was his running joke, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
That was the original series, and then later on they become like faith healers and
Oh, of
Oh,
course
yeah,
they
stuff
do.
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Right, yeah. What you were saying then about like they always pop up like every series to have their little bit. I do wonder if it's just like they must just be friends with Jennifer.
Must-
Oh, I
Lawrence,
mean,
isn't it?
Christopher
Like-
Ryan definitely.
Well, Christopher
was-
Ryan goes right back to the
Yeah,
90s,
he's part of that whole
It's actually-
movement.
Now, main idea of how you can fill this film with anything you want. In the TV show, they use a lot flashbacks, little sort of
Okay.
dream sequences, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
A lot to their childhood
Mm.
or when they're younger. They do it a lot. When you use that in your afterlife session, have you seen Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey?
Yes.
In that, when they're in hell, you kind of open a door and it's like a scene from your life. So basically, steal that idea.
could past lives factor into this? If one of them's a Buddhist, could
Possibly,
they do
yeah.
a Blackadder type thing of just a few sketches of them prattling around in ancient Egypt?
I tell
and
you
that
what,
sort of
they have done stuff about past lives. But yeah, so that Bill and Ted idea of
Okay.
where you can relive scenes from your
Yeah.
life, and perhaps they could change them, or you could even have a scene from their childhood and have like younger actors playing them, which they never did in the show. They always like played themselves younger, but maybe a little bit too old for that. So Safi wants to get away, even though Eddie and Patsy are really enjoying hell. They're settling quite nicely. It's like 60s. Anyway, basically figures out she has to go towards the light, and Eddie basically, you got Patsy one side, Safi other, Eddie in the middle. And Eddie ends up going with Patsy. So Safi goes away through her and goes to the light, and then sort of wakes up in a hospital bed, and she's been in a coma. And like the father's there, and he says like, "Oh yeah, you've been in an accident. You were in a coma. Patsy and Eddie are dead." That's the end. So I wanted to kind of kill everyone off. But although that was kind of a nice conclusion, I tried to look at it as a film to kind of as a swan song and like a big sort of
That
hurrah.
was really nice, actually.
I-
I'd actually see that.
I think, yeah, the difference between our pictures is basically that yours would actually work
Yeah,
as a film.
that was-
Well, I
whereas
think, and just when you're in a fantasy world, like you can pretty much do whatever you want.
it's
You
a
can-
bigger, well, that's it, it's big enough in scope to justify being a film.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't betray the nature of the show in doing so. It's very difficult for sitcoms turn films to find that balance, I think. A lot of films don't go big enough. It's difficult. Especially given that going abroad is such a cliche now that you kind of can't do it really.
I was wondering if it was like a budgetary thing, like, most sitcoms from the 70s just couldn't afford to go on holiday. So they had to, that was the justification for the movie. They had to, they had the money, they could actually go do it. Whereas now,
The
with TV budgets, you just can go abroad. So.
The thing that kind of established the cliche as a cliche, I would say, is "Are you being served?" And they didn't even go abroad in the film. It was all done on a really crappy set, like the show, probably the same studio.
That was a product of its time, though. That time when working class people were Spain as a tourist attraction had opened up, and people could afford to go to it now, rather than just over a weekend in Blackpool.
Yeah.
And so it was a reflection of that, really.
But it does
but
beg
it
the
allowed
question.
them to expand the world as well.
It does beg the question of why they couldn't have just made a few new sets for an episode of the show. I guess sets cost money.
Calvin?
My pitch on that note would be very cheap to make. Actually,
Ooh.
this is. I'm surprised actually. Thinking about this, I could not think of anything unless it was you either go meta with it or send them to space. I could not. I could not think of anything else because the show just has done everything.
I flirted with both of them.
This would be because the thing that has struck me about the Ab Fab movie is that they've talked about it's like the Alan Partridge thing where they've talked about it for years and it's just never come about. But Jennifer Saunders has made quite a thing about she ended up only doing it because Joanna Lumley kept announcing it without actually consulting anyone. So Joanna Lumley would just be like, "Well, Jennifer's writing the script right now." And she, "Oh, what? No, I'm not." So finally, apparently, I guess Joanna Lumley just wanted to star in a movie.
Yeah.
It's really quite nice as a 60-odd-year-old woman to have a star vehicle again. For Jennifer Saunders to just be so blatantly like, "Oh yeah, well, I'm getting around to writing it," and one of the things she actually said was, I procrastinate so much and all this, and it's not really giving you much faith in the final product.
Yeah.
The person who's supposed to be the driving creative force is sort of like, well, I'll maybe get around to it eventually. So this pitch is based on Jennifer Saunders never actually getting around to writing the movie. So it's sort of Jennifer Saunders is playing herself,
Right.
The plot of the movie is that Jennifer Saunders has to write the plot of the Ab Fab movie.
Brilliant.
Because again, it was like what Alan was saying about how, because the show was never very plot driven, it was all just character driven, it's a very open-ended film about...
So do we see glimpses of, she'll sit down and write a scene, and then we'll see the scene with Patsy and Eddie actually doing it, and then we'll kind of cut back to her going, no, that's stupid, or do we never actually see Patsy?
No, we never
and Eddie?
actually see Patsy already, but we have everyone playing themselves or versions of themselves.
I just want to throw out, in French and Saunders' TV show, they would have a regular sketch where they were sitting in their office trying to write, and someone would keep coming in and disturbing them, and then they would just be like procrastinating all the time.
Oh, I
so
had no
this
idea.
this has got precedent. Like this could work. You could work this really well.
I can't believe that. Huh. Oh, well, yeah, no, because it's basically...
But that is that was one sketch.
And I'm sure that was born out of them probably just procrastinating.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know what we're right, just write this. So the whole film is basically people are pressuring her to write the movie. She's got fans. Joanna Lumley is the main antagonist of the film. She's really desperate for this. So she's just like nagging her and like chasing her around. We go to like foreign countries and stuff, maybe Egypt. So Jennifer Saunders is just getting away because it's just like, no, I just need to go on holiday. Oh no, I'm doing this other project.
Research as well.
Need to go and Joanna Lumley's main reason for wanting the movie is because she's getting old. She's not getting leading roles anymore. She needs the exposure because she needs the money to produce her passion project, which is a movie about the Gurkhas.
The Gurkhas are going to turn up at some point.
and their plight to get their what was it? It was pensions or something they wanted.
Well, the right to live in a country they defended in the war.
But my hope would be that you would still market this as absolutely fabulous, the movie.
Would you like indicate? Would it be a kind of like, we're going to show the film in a minute. It's going to be in a minute, and then at the end maybe you have like a 30-second film that's just
and that's what you put out as a trailer.
I think that would work. Yes. Because the whole point would be that you wouldn't want the audience to have a clue what's going on. Sort of very confused about what they're watching. So you would still have gratuitous celebrity cameos, but just people playing themselves, sort of talking about being in the movie. Like Lulu would be
doing
there.
A celebrity cameo. Yeah.
Like Lulu's there. She's like, well, when's the movie going to be released? I've got an album coming out that needs promotion. If we could make these dates align or whatever. Julia Sawala would be there, sort of having some kind of cosmetic surgery to make herself look young again. Even though she's like 50 now or whatever, they're still like, even in the later episodes of Ab Fab, they still kind of position her. They acknowledge that she's older.
Yeah, they did drive the character forward a little bit, and she has her own kid. But yeah, she still plays the daughter, doesn't she? She still plays, as much as she ever was. She still lives in the same house.
So the whole movie would just be a series of other things that Jennifer Saunders does, with the running thread of Joanna Lumley chasing her around the world to try and get her. And at the end of the movie would climax with the audience would hopefully be really pissed off that they marketed the Ab Fab movie, and then about 90 minutes in, they finally maybe they're in Hawaii and a volcano or something dramatic, and Jennifer Saunders finally just like breaks down and said, look, if I don't want to make it this much, whatever I make is not going to be acceptable. You will hate it. You shouldn't wish, you shouldn't. Yeah, I obviously don't give a shit. So why, you would all be so disappointed anyway. So it should be talking to Joanna Lumley, talking to the audience, and then that would be it. And maybe we would have like a 5 minutes of actual to use for the trailer.
Completely slap the audience in the face.
It's really frustrating when you have people.
I would love that. That would be.
Because it's really frustrating when you
amazing.
have like people like these completely different thing. But Sam Smith with like the most recent Bond theme, and he was like, we just wrote it in 20 minutes, and like even Adele was like, oh yeah, it was just one take. It's like it really bothers me when these creative people are just like so flippant about like how like this great thing that we're supposed to buy into, and then it's like, oh, I just can't be bothered to write it.
I'm not sure as a commercial prospect is
no,
promising.
It would never. I think yours is the most likely to actually.
I think Alan's is a really good idea to make a proper film that might actually be a viable option. But I would much rather go and see Catherine.
Yeah. But even like the League of Gentlemen did the meta thing, and they at least incorporated the characters into it. So.
And they got a lot of backlash for having a third of that film be new material that they were like writing that no one wanted to see.
I really liked that though. I enjoyed that.
And
it was in keeping with the nature of the show, I thought.
Well, that's the thing, but that was always a weird show. It didn't really feel out of place for them to go meta and have the characters come into the real world. Something like that, I don't think would work for AbFab. You couldn't have these characters come into the real world.
I think you could have, as in to tweak your idea and make it a little bit more actually viable.
I think.
I mean, as a realistic idea.
I think.
You could have the meta element of them trying to write the film, and then you cut to they're doing the scenes.
Exactly.
Or you see the scenes that they're talking about.
And there doesn't have to be much of a story. It could just be like a series of set pieces that go nowhere, just sketches essentially. Because you're out of every scene is you just cut to Jennifer Saunders scrunching up a bit of paper and going, no, or
I find that really interesting that all of our ideas picked up on the sort of aimlessness of the like lack of plot.
It's because when you come down to put an idea together, you go, okay, I need the structure, I need the plot, and then you go, well, there's nothing to hang on to here. There's nothing here.
That wasn't what my memory of it was. Like, this is the first time that I've gone back and watched quite a big chunk of it since probably the specials in like 2012.
But that's it. It works in our half-hour
it does,
broadcast because you don't need much plot and you can aim.
Well, yeah, because it's like half an hour long, and the first 10 minutes is just like Eddie and Safi in the kitchen just talking for 10 minutes, and it's sort of like, is there a plot happening? Like, what's...
Think about it, going on a complete tangent, but Beavis and Butthead's quite a good template for how that can work, because the series Beavis and Butthead are these 5-minute sketches, and there's rarely an ending. There's a beginning and a middle, and then it just kind of peters out. There's very little in the way of plot. It's just like Beavis and Butthead decide to wash a dog, and that's the whole episode, and that be interspersed with music videos to pad it out to a 15-minute running length. But then they made Beavis and Butthead Do America, which is this very tightly written, plot-driven film, and I think it's a very good film that far surpasses what the series actually did.
We're staying true to the
characters. But that's it. It's very true to the characters, but it's very plot driven all of a sudden. But the thing that made it work without betraying the characters, and what could work here thinking about it, is that they are very passive protagonists. They don't really make any decisions that define their future. They're just kind of, there are these characters introduced who are these sort of criminals that end up using them as a kind of smuggling operation. And they're kind of just led astray by all these other characters from set piece to set piece, and so you've got this big story going on around them. And I mean, a similar thing would probably work, thinking about it, for
What about
Absolutely Fabulous.
Absolutely Fabulous. Eddie and Patsy accidentally get tricked into being drug mules and end up in a Thai prison. That's a good setup.
Didn't that already happen?
No, I don't think so.
Is that one in Morocco? Oh no, is it the French one where they're at the airport?
Oh, they did touch
like
on it.
It's like a perfectly harmless white substance.
Yeah. Oh, they bought drugs, but it turned out not to.
They weren't actually drugs. Yeah.
They've never been in prison, though, have they?
No, I don't think they have. Safi was in prison.
Yeah, in the off.
Off screen.
Just see like Midnight Express.
Yeah, but I suppose that is the way to embrace the aimlessness of the series without not having a story. I guess the closest to that in our pitches would be Alan's.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the final film is like.
I think it'll be like a sort of overlong episode that really drags.
Have
funny moments, but it's like, okay, that was a bit too long.
I think that's right. I think that's about.
I hope it's good.
Yeah, fingers crossed. They've got cameos galore.
Okay, that's it for this week. Absolutely Fabulous is out on Friday, probably, I guess.
Or maybe Wednesday or Thursday.
Check local listings.
Do come back next week when we will be discussing Ghostbusters.
We've been Diminishing Returns. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye.